Everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It's Monday. Yes, it is Monday, April 28th, 2025. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. We're back, and we're going to talk draft result, I guess, this time.
Yeah, I mean, how could we not? How could we have you all waiting till Thursday to get our instant reactions? We probably should have did this show Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. We're doing it Monday, recapping all 7 rounds, talking about some of our favorite picks, and honestly, just getting excited that we are one more milestone event closer to the actual NFL season kicking off.
We are. I mean, next we have OTAs and mini camps. We got our dynasty draft starting to ramp up soon. This is the exciting part of the offseason when you start to see things take shape.
Yeah, just over 2 weeks from the schedule release. Gotta love when they make an announcement about an announcement, but that's what the NFL does, and figure out where our teams are going to play in just a couple of weeks. And of course, we'll break that down then too.
Yes, we will. So make sure you stick with us at the Couch GMs, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok to get even more than you do from the show here. You can comment any of our posts, DM, or comment on our lives. Thursdays at 6:30 is our usual time. Obviously, it was different last week, and we have the special episode here. But Thursdays, 6:30 East. Check us out on Facebook and YouTube Live and join in on the discussion. Why don't we react to the draft, Cody, and go back on the clock? Bet you're glad you get to hear that sound just one more time this season.
One last time until next year when the draft will be in Pittsburgh. They did pass the baton, so to speak. I think they actually use a football, but passed it on to Pittsburgh, our home state. So that'll be fun. Maybe we'll have some Couch James content from the draft next year. We'll have to wait and see. But did want to give a quick shout out to Green Bay, the smallest market in professional sports, having a mega party, 600,000 attended over the course of 3 days. I know the Detroit rivalry is going strong where they're like, oh, we had 750 last year. You're also a mega city. For reference, Nashville, everyone talks about being a prime draft. They had 600,000. So right up there with Nashville, another small market team. So these small market teams balling out drafts. It looked incredible in Green Bay. What I really appreciated was they used Lambeau Field as a prop. And
Yes,
had that be the backdrop. But I don't know if anyone caught this. If you weren't there, you knew. But if you didn't, you could also then just go and watch the draft in Lambeau Field. So like you could be there and not stand in the crowd. You could be sitting in the iconic stadium watching the draft, plus everything else going on. So an incredible time. Green Bay looked great, and there's a lot of good picks to talk about.
Definitely. I think it would have been super cool to go there. And did you have to get a ticket to go into Lambeau, or is it like you could just general
admission?
Wow.
So they've changed the draft up a little bit, especially as they started moving these around now. Basically, it's free entry for everything. Now there is like a ticketed section or like premium entry for like the seated section in that very front row where all the fans are, where they section them off in fans, so they have the cameras to cut through depending on who picks. But like once you get past the bike racks, I think they're called, where everyone's standing and stuff like that, that's just general admission. That's the fan experience you can walk through. That's where like the stuff they have going on. This was even when I was at the draft in Philly, they had like a pop-up Hall of Fame with different people. They had a bunch of like props of jerseys and go stand behind your favorite team. They had the Lombardi trophies on display, the Packers Super Bowl rings on display, like just an overall fan experience. And they included Lambeau Field in that, which, I mean, any fan in general just wants to walk into Lambeau Field. So being able to do that at the draft and not have to pay game time tickets could have been worth the trip in itself.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. I would have loved to be able to just go in there, even if it's just sitting there for 20 minutes to watch the draft party and just like take it all in, because that's a bucket list stadium for any sports fan.
For sure. And 600,000 people got to see that. Before we talk about the draft much more, you're probably going to see a lot of signings over the next couple of days of minor free agents that might have, teams didn't get the players they wanted in draft. They're going to go back to free agency to supplement some of those holes. Just a couple that has come across as of right now and over the last hour. Deontay Johnson is going to Cleveland. Robert Woods is going to Pittsburgh. And then on the defensive side, Isaiah Simmons is going to Green Bay. So just a couple of those like low-end tier veteran names that you're going to recognize, but probably won't do much for fantasy and or the upcoming seasons in that sense. But a lot of names could, find new homes. We might see a couple trades, maybe some cap casualty releases at this point. So like the NFL never sleeps.
Exactly. But Cody, so we have all the picks in. We had some very interesting things happen. Where do you want to start with just breaking down the draft?
So, first of all, I will say I'm very anti draft grades. I know a lot of people like their draft grades, see how their team does. I'm very much a believer that it takes 3 years for you to truly evaluate a class. Uh,
Mhm.
Let players get in, get out. And obviously, Couch GM's background is fantasy football, so a lot of our conversations is talking about fantasy football. So before we go into there, um, let's start about the big trade. Obviously, we all knew Cam Ward was going 1 to Tennessee. I think we talked enough about that. Pre-draft, they added some nice guys like Elika Numenor out of Stanford, which I think could be an NWI replacement. So at least maybe some touchdown guys or fun name to watch from that scheme standpoint perspective. But let's talk about the big trade that happened on draft day that apparently was worked out for a couple weeks, but they just had to make sure Travis Hunter was going to be there. And that was the Jacksonville Jaguars going from 5 to 2 to get Travis Hunter. Now, it sounds like they're going to start him out at wide receiver. I think that's interesting. But they announced him as both, so he's going to play somewhat of both. But it seems like they're going to at least start him out in the wide receiver room. Thoughts on that?
Well, first off, it's interesting to me how much like homework you see put in, especially to these top picks, and then you see this big trade happen from 5 to 2, and you hear the Jags did not even meet with Travis Hunter since the combine. I mean, I think he was probably the automatic prospect you didn't really have to worry about, but it's interesting in today's NFL to hear that happen. When it comes to him playing wide receiver, it's going to be tough to figure out exactly where he should go in fantasy and dynasty drafts because he's not going to be your wide receiver one in that offense right off the bat. They still have Brian Thomas there. They're an offense that's kind of underproduced a little bit, but you're hoping now they're starting to turn a corner. Um, and the fact that he's going to play both ways, you got to think he's not going to have a full snap count on offense. He's not going to play every offensive down if they're expecting him to play some on defense. This isn't high school where you're going to see a kid play every single snap of every single game. It's just not going to happen. He'd wear down. So it's hard to figure out in my head where exactly he would go. I think he might still be the top wide receiver or maybe the second wide receiver off the board in Dynasty. But I think there's some running backs that I'm liking before him that I don't think I would really put Travis Hunter to per se, pick 2 in Dynasty drafts.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think so. For at least when we're talking dynasty, and I believe on Thursday, maybe it's next week, it's coming up very soon, is our dynasty rookie mock draft, where we're going to do 2-3 rounds of the rookies for a mock draft and see where they're going to go.
Yeah.
Now, I know on our main dynasty site, MFL football or whatever it's called, not a sponsor, they are listing him as a wide receiver. They're not giving him dual positions like you've seen with like a Taysom Hill getting tight end and quarterback, right? They're not giving him that dual role. But if you're playing on Sleeper or a different dynasty platform, double check. Because I will say, if you're playing an IDP dynasty and you get a wide receiver in the cornerback spot, I think that changes the calculus a lot.
Definitely.
If you can have that cheat code of him being a cornerback but still getting wide receiver points and you can play a different wide receiver, that would be a cheat code. But if he's just strictly a wide receiver, I think it'll be, great player. I think he'll be a lot of fun in the actual NFL, but in terms of dynasty, I think, you're looking at picks 5 to 7.
Yeah, no, I agree with that there. So double check the eligibility. The other thing is, I mean, it's going to depend on how your scoring works in your league. I would assume even if he has wide receiver eligibility, but gets tackles or interceptions or such at cornerback, you would still get points for that. The only time I've ever seen a player get split is in baseball when it comes to, like, say, Ohtani with the pitcher and batter being 2 separate players. I don't think that's happening in this case when it comes to fantasy football.
I think it could in IDP leagues, right?
Okay.
Like if you are a true IDP league, which is very, not the biggest gamut of people that play that. And if you're really new to fantasy, IDP is individual defensive player. That's what it stands for. But the opportunity to have a defender that gets the defensive stats and a wide receiver that gets the wide receiver stats, I think they could split him there. And that's what makes him such a fascinating piece for fantasy and just in general, that the fact that the Jaguars traded an additional first round pick next year for a non-quarterback to move up 3 spots. That just kind of goes to show the kind of player that he is altogether.
Definitely. So as we learn more about his usage, we'll let you guys know. I'm interested to see where he falls in our mock draft coming up on Thursday. So make sure you're tuned in. Make sure you subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss that. And what else do you want to talk about here, Cody?
All right, let's go. Obviously, again, we talked about Genty being the guy he was. He went to a perfect spot with the Raiders.
Yep.
I mean, at least the Raiders family, GM's family, staying together because they took Genty. I think he's the home run 101 in Dynasty. No matter what you think of Travis Hunter, he's the guy you're taking at the number 1 pick if you have the worst team last year in Dynasty. And we'll talk more as we get into it, but I think he'll be a high targeted, even redraft player just because the lack of competition there and the opportunity and a coach like Pete Carroll that likes to run the ball. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get through this process if Aston Genty is a first round running back in redraft as well. We've seen
that with Najee Harris too. I'm pretty sure was the first one.
I believe Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first round pick. That one didn't work out as well. Bijan Robinson, I think he's been a first round pick ever since he's, at least
been second in his rookie year, but still very high.
Yeah. And I think Genty's going to fit that mold. I really do like the Tet McMillan going number 8 overall to the Carolina Panthers. I think that's a great spot for him, especially the Bryce Young last year. I think that spot gets him into the conversation as like the 102. I think I'm still leaning running backs, but we can wait till Thursday to talk about that one. But I think the biggest shock in the top 15 when it comes to the skill position players was the flip at tight end with Colston Loveland going to the Chicago Bears and then Tyler Warren falling to 14 Indianapolis Colts, who I believe I mocked every time Loveland going to them because I knew they wanted a tight end, but they got Tyler Warren. On the surface, it like in the moment, I was completely shocked. I still kind of am, but knowing Ben Johnson, Colston Loveland has that Sam Laporta build, the athletic over the middle, the bigger guy, where Tyler Warren, I think he has all the potential in the world. He's just a little bit more
wide receiver-ish,
but also like, I don't want to say H-back, but like he has almost like, he feels more like a Kyle Juszczyk, but taller and bigger. It's like, that's the name I come. He's not a fullback. Like, I'm not saying he's a fullback, but he has that, like, he can line up more in the backfield. He can do a little bit more of everything, where I think Loveland will be the inline guy that can play big slot in the red zone kind of thing. And I think that makes a ton of, I think honestly, they're both going to be pretty good tight ends in general. But
no, I'm trying to think of a good comparison to him.
The
best one I've come up with is in my head is Mark Andrews, because I know he lines up at fullback, he lines up at tight end, and he lines up at wide receiver. And that's what you're going to kind of see out of Tyler Warren, especially going to Indy where they have holes to fill everywhere. And I think he's going to be a good gadget player. But I kind of think like that comparison doesn't really do justice to, I think he's a better wide receiver type player than Andrews is.
Yeah, and I would even argue he's definitely a better blocker and stuff like that. Maybe like some older listeners out there, Delaney Walker, Vernon Davis type.
There you go. That's a good one.
So, but honestly, those two are interesting. But as a Packers fan, it was great to see the Bears take the number 2 tight end when the number 1 tight end was still on the board, and take a tight end in the top 10 because they typically don't pan out, but these guys have the potential to.
Yeah, I mean, you were actually getting some flack on social media from Bears fans mocking them a tight end. So I kind of wanted to go back and ask their thoughts after you not only mocked them the correct position, but not even the better player. But if there's any Bears fans listening in, drop in the comments how you're feeling about that one.
For sure. Obviously there was a lot of defensive players. We could talk about the Atlanta Falcons next, who went 15. They went Jalen Walker at edge. And then they had the big trade to come back up into the first round to get another defensive end, James Pierce Jr. And we talked all offseason about how their pass rush needed desperate help. and they gave up a 2026 first round pick, which you don't see very often. But that's what you got to do when you're coming from the 40s into the first round. They did give up an additional first round pick. They also did get a fourth round pick, a top 100 pick back as well. I think that often gets forgotten about when you hear, oh, they gave up a first round pick next year. Well, they still got a top 100 pick and a first round pick this year. So like the trade value is there. But they doubled up at the edge position to hopefully, chase after the quarterbacks, and that division, like pressure on the quarterbacks means everything.
Is this the Falcons trying to be like, we think we have the pieces in place to compete and we're going for now, being that they're being
100%.
that aggressive? I mean, and pass rush was their big issue. Like you said, they were the worst pass rushing team in the league, but they have some pieces on the offense. They have two quarterbacks in place now that are competent. Hopefully you get even more out of Michael Penix this year than you did out of his solid rookie start. So yeah, I do think they have a chance to compete, but I was surprised to see them being that aggressive.
I also think this is like the scenario too, where like, and obviously the Giants didn't have to get this desperate, but like the Falcons, after, taking Michael Penix while still having Kirk Cousins, their expectations and missing the playoffs, the GM probably knows he's on a short leash.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, it's about winning now. And if they win, they'll figure out the pick next year. The pick's later in the first round, anyways. And if they lose, he's probably not there to make the pick anyway. So what's it matter to him? So I think there's some of that going on for there. And then obviously the Rams, who the counterpart of them, back to, for lack of better words, F them picks, because, they
The
don't make
Rams
first
don't
round
make
picks.
first round picks.
No, yeah, the Rams trade. I completely understand the Rams making the trade at that point in the draft. Like, I think that was an incredible deal that they pulled off. So I have no blame for them. And I think it's also interesting to note that, they've had issues with Stafford the last couple of years of like, is he retiring? Is he playing? Does he just want a new deal? What's all that mean? Now they're going to have 2 first round picks next year and an arguably better quarterback class, which they're going to need because they're a good team. So they're going to need to package those picks to move up. If they want to take the predecessor to one Matthew Stafford. So that's something to watch. The next name I want to talk about, and I want to get your thoughts too, was honestly the most surprising pick to me in the moment. And I love the player. I still don't fully understand it, but that is Emeka Ibuka going 19th to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
When they have Mike Evans, obviously he is aging, but Ibuka is more of like slot outside. He could play outside for sure. Like, I don't think there's any issue with that, but he's going to thrive in the slot. He's very similar to like a Chris Godwin game. So maybe there is some concern, but they just re-upped him. And then Jalen McMillan had a really good, second half of the season for the rookie last year. So it just feels odd to go 4 wide receivers deep. But unless you're just, planning to move on from Mike Evans or maybe Chris Godwin, I didn't really break down the numbers too much, but maybe that's more of like a 1-year deal, and we'll see. And they're planning to move on, or can that insurance if he can't stay healthy?
Yeah, it was a surprising pick to me too, because the first thing that came to my mind is what you said, where it's like, are they basically saying Mike Evans has got 1, maybe 2 more years and he's on the way out? They're trying to make sure they still have 2 solid wide receivers. But the fact that he's a lot like Godwin makes it confusing because they just upped Godwin. You have them together for at least 3 seasons. And I'm interested to see how they work that offense. It's not like this is a second or third round wide receiver where you're like, you obviously hope for a lot of production, but it's not as much of a lock as picking him at pick 19. You can say that like it's a weaker draft class, and a lot of people have been saying that, and they were probably just going best available on their board. But there's other guys that I think were very comparable that could have made a bigger impact, like Jahdae Barron, who was taken right after him. There was a couple offensive line pieces, never hurts. Malachi Stark still went after him. Jihad Campbell. Like, there's other guys that I think could have made a difference on their team a lot more at positions that maybe weren't of need, but they needed more than another wide receiver when you had 3 guys that were producing already.
Yeah, and you have to remember too, when it comes to draft, it takes 2 teams to make a trade.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just trade down to trade down. Now I know some teams did trade up once we got to the mid 20s, but sitting at 19, maybe the Giants didn't want to pay the price that far to come up against Jackson Dart. Maybe they weren't even worried about like a team like Pittsburgh taking him, and then They don't have to, give them that many assets and whatnot. So maybe they were stuck. I think they would have loved to have Shamar Stewart, who went 2 picks earlier to the Cincinnati Bengals. But Emeka Ibuka, interesting name. Not sure how I feel about that, especially when it comes to dynasty. You mentioned Jahdae Barron. I think pairing him with Patrick Surtain is going to be so much fun for Denver, slowing down Kansas City, slowing down the Chargers, and eventually slowing down, the Raiders. I know they need.
Oh, you cut out there, Cody. Make sure you check your mic. No, you're muted.
Did my camera flash black too?
No.
On my camera flashed black, and you said you're muted. So I was very confused on what just happened. But we're back. We're good to go. Maybe.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you see the Derek Harmon stuff that happened over the past weekend?
No.
So, tragic situation. He gets drafted by the Steelers, and his mom is on life support. Literally so first of all, condolences. His mom ends up passing away like hours after he makes it to the hospital. Be like, hey, I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Almost like that was the thing she was hanging on to. Hearing her son's name get drafted, told her, and then unfortunately she tragically passed away. So condolences to the Derek Harmon family. But just, I don't even want to call it a cool, the uniqueness to that moment and how tough that had to be him, as getting drafted being one of the brightest moments in your life as a lifelong athlete, to losing your mom the same day. Such a tragic situation. So again, condolences to him. Omarion Hampton goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. I think we both talked ourselves into really wanting him to be in Denver.
Yes.
It did not happen. He went to a division rival. They have Najee Harris though, but I think Hampton will quickly overtake Najee Harris. It's only a 1-year deal, but because of the fit, I don't know if that locks him in to the 102 in dynasty drafts like I thought it would have in Denver.
Yeah, just because of Najee Harris kind of hanging over you there. But I feel like it took a lot of convincing for me to be like, Najee Harris is a good thing for the Chargers. Like, it was obviously starting caliber running back fit, but Najee Harris was very wishy-washy after his rookie season. I have an easier time talking myself into Omarion Hampton as the Chargers' long-term option and somebody who can be productive in fantasy. I still think he probably goes like 103 in dynasty drafts.
I think 104 is his
the absolute floor. Low. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't feel as good of a fit, but when you look at it, even with Najee Harris there, they're a run first team. They have to rotate backs because they run the ball so much. So the opportunity's there, and it's a solid running football team as well. So
no, I agree. I think 104 is his floor when it comes to dynasty, and it just puts him in this Tech going to a home run place. Yep. We can talk about Trayvon Henderson going to a home run place with the New England Patriots. Like, that makes them more interesting names to compete with Omarion Hampton at that 102 spot. And Hampton still might be the guy. You have to wait till Thursday to find out. Can't talk draft reactions without talking about the host city. For the first time since 2002, drafting a wide receiver in the first round, Mr. Green and Golden himself, Matthew Golden, to the Green Bay Packers. Don't roll your eyes. It's a great name.
Because you say Green and Golden. Come on.
Hey, Green and Golden, Matthew Golden. He goes to the Packers. Good fit. They need some wide receiver help. I like the prospect. Really good hands catcher. Only thing I don't like is he's slated to wear number 22 as a wide receiver, and I'm not sure how I'm feeling about that.
That
because
just looks bad.
I was trying to think of like any other wide receivers that wear in the 20s, and the only one I could think of was Sky Moore, who wears 24, and that one didn't pan out very well. So,
no, I mean, can you make him
Deuce McAllister used to,
so
but
it
he was
matches where he was drafted in the draft, and then he can have that reminder of like 22 people were taken before me?
Well, I think maybe that's why he wore 22.
That could be 22. Yeah, that's a good point.
He wore number 2 in college.
Okay.
I think he wanted number 2, but Malik Willis wears number 2, and he wants some
Oh
games.
yeah, because Malik Willis definitely needs that number.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that switches or gets tweaked out. But that just the fun oddball factor of aesthetically, I don't know how I feel about Matthew Golden wearing 22, but I think he's going to be a solid home run pick. Just when it comes to fantasy and the Packers, they like to spread the ball around, and I don't know how much you can rely on a quote unquote true number 1 guy in that offense as a pass catcher.
Is this the giving up on Christian Watson pick because of the injuries? Because they're similar players, are they not?
They are completely different. They're both
Okay.
fast. So I think
That's what I was thinking. Like, they're both field stretch players, but
they're both fast, but one is 5'11", 190 pounds. The other one is 6'4", 220. So
okay.
I don't think anything Matthew Golden does. I don't think this is, hey, we're giving up on Christian Watson. Now they did take Xavion Williams in the 3rd round, who is the bigger build guy, but he's more like a Cordarrelle Patterson comp. Like he has some running ability, just a big guy, like overall playmaker. And maybe it's just my bias of not wanting to move on from Christian Watson. I think he is a really talented player who's just been unfortunate with injuries, and ultimately, availability is the most important thing in the NFL. So maybe they decide to, as he will be a free agent heading into next offseason and going to miss probably the first 12 weeks of the ACL. But I think you can't ever have enough speed on the field, and I think Golden and Watson complement each other pretty well. You throw in a guy like Jaden Reed in the slot and a Tucker Kraft at tight end, Josh Jacobs. I think you have a really good, offensive core right
You
there.
didn't mention Romeo Dobbs, so
Yeah. Romeo Dobbs, didn't mention him, didn't mention Dontavian Wicks. Like there's a lot of pieces on this offense. And again, that's why I think Matthew Golden might not be, that highly sought after player despite being a 1st round pick. I think he'll be very good, but at least in terms of fantasy, might not be the most sought after guy. But I hope I'm wrong on that.
yeah, obviously we all want another solid wide receiver, especially coming out of Green Bay since they've been a successful team. But I think the fact they spread the ball out so much and still have a lot of talent at wide receiver, just haven't had that number 1. Even if they have that number 1, you got to think his ceiling is probably going to be a little bit lower. So I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing out there, if you're thinking, heck, Matt LaFleur had some dominating seasons, with a Devontae Adams, and I'm not saying Matthew Golden is a Devontae Adams type player, but we've at least seen this offense before filter through a true number 1.
Yeah.
Then we took a step back, so maybe we start to get there. I just don't think it'll be this year, but maybe as the year progresses, and maybe Watson and Dobbs are both not back next year when free agency comes around. But that's a long way away. The next
so Golden
thing
is more of a Zay Flowers player, is what you're telling me, right?
yeah, that's probably a good comp, at least for
There you
now.
go. Okay.
And I would consider Zay Flowers the number 1 in Baltimore.
Yeah.
But some weeks are great.
They
some
spread the
weeks are
ball
not.
out as well. Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. Cool. We got
That's
there.
probably a really good comp. Also, interesting fact. This is like violin, Tyler's oddball fact. I don't have that anymore. But 20 pick number 23 for the last 3 years have been a wide receiver. 2 years ago it was Jordan Addison. Last year it was Brian Thomas. So like
Haven't
if
been
3rd
bad.
time's the charm, like Matthew Golden could be a star.
Yeah, both of those guys haven't been bad. I mean, Addison's been up and down, but like he really put it together in the second half of the year last year. And then Brian Thomas was the darling of fantasy teams last year.
So it's just a name to keep an eye on. And then of course we got to talk about at least the 1st round. Jackson Dart trading up, the Giants trade up to get Jackson Dart to add him to Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and Danny DeVito.
For now.
Obviously,
Danny DeVito requested a trade right after this happened.
Ooh, shocker.
Yeah.
But it is worth noting that Brian Daboll did say Russell Wilson is still the expected starter as of now. So
No,
that's pretty much like
just to tease Giants fans a little bit. They drafted an Eagles fan at pick 3 and then traded up to get a quarterback who miles his game off of Jalen Hurts. So
yeah, that's what you got to do, right?
Being the annoying Eagles fan now.
Alrighty, that's pretty much like the big names for the 1st round. If you want to talk about Jihad Campbell, I know the Eagles are trying to trade up for him, but they were able to get him at pick 31. They did trade up with the Chiefs.
I thought
So
they
it
were
was,
trying to trade him for Malachi Starks, but I was wrong.
but and he went to the Ravens. So at least you get to. I know that was a guy you like, so you get to cheer for him. I did appreciate that the Chiefs got to three-peat the number 32 pick, though. Shout
Yeah.
out to that.
Yeah, there you go.
And then as we get into like the next couple of rounds, some names to watch. I talked about Trayvon Henderson going to the Patriots in round 2. Luther Bird in the 3rd was one of my favorite players in this draft. So I hate that he's going to Chicago. But if you remember back a couple weeks to our wide receiver episode, I said he reminds me a lot of DJ Moore. I don't know how DJ Moore and DJ Moore, or aka Luther Burden, play together in year 1. But as Moore gets a little bit older, could he start to take some of those, or could you start to see Moore not just be the screen guy and start to do more things down the field, which he is definitely capable of. So I think Burden helps him, but I think it also opens up more things for DJ Moore. So I think that
That's just such a crowded wide receiver room.
I mean it is, but you have your 3, right? Like you have DJ Moore and Roma Dunze, and then you're going to have Luther Burden in the slot with Colson Loveland at tight end, and there you go. That's your core. Like I don't think you're gonna.
Is Keenan Allen not there anymore?
No, he was a free agent. He's still a free agent.
Oh, my bad.
So
okay,
there was talks of him coming back, but he did not. Quinshawn
that pretty much
Judkins
squashes it then.
Yeah, Quinshawn Judkins going to the Browns. So that's a name to watch, especially with Nick Chubb, a free agent. Nick Chubb dealt with plenty of injuries, probably not going to be back. So that's a name that could work his way into that tier as well. Jaden Higgins in the 2nd round to the why am I blanking on the Houston Texans is a really fun name to pay attention to for sure. Jack Beck is a name to watch for your sleeper dynasty players. Really good player out of TCU, wide receiver, and we know there hasn't been an elite number 1 wide receiver since they traded Devontae in Las Vegas. So Jack Beck could be like if you have a later round dynasty pick, could be the flyer worth taking. Same with RJ Harvey, the running back out of UCF that went to the Broncos in the 2nd round. So those are some names to watch in the 2nd round. Any other names or any of those names stick out to you, or names you want to mention?
I was going to ask you about what you thought of Judkins getting drafted before Henderson. I mean, it could have just been a fit. Judkins really, I think, does fit that Cleveland Browns running back kind of aesthetic in my mind. And I hope he does have a breakout like Nick Chubb did when he first jumped onto the scene. But I was surprised to see Judkins go over Henderson.
Yeah, I was too, but I think it was more of a fit thing, and they went like 3 picks apart. I actually prefer Henderson. I think you did too. But Judkins is an explosive, powerful runner, and I think he'll fit well there in Cleveland.
And then I like that you mentioned Betch there. Did you mention Trey Harris to the Chargers as well?
I did not, but that's he is a straight line big play receiver, and that could be big with play action, big arms, Justin Herbert. So I do like that fit as well. Maybe someone to can hang on to the ball, unlike his counterpart there in Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, maybe someone that plays instead of Quentin Johnston, instead of next to Quentin Johnston.
For sure. Some other names to talk about as like day 2 players. When you get to round 3, I'm anytime you're or heck. Let's start with round 3. Okay. And we'll talk about the 2 quarterbacks that were taken. Yep. I don't think they mean much for fantasy, and the one's very fascinating. Jalen Milroe going to Seattle. That's the name I'm paying attention to, as in I'm curious on how that unfolds. Because I don't think anyone is fully bought into Sam Darnold. I don't think Sam Darnold is it's basically a 1-year deal. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying Milroe is going to come in and steal the job right away, but if history sort of repeats itself and Sam Darnold is Matt Flynn and Jalen Milroe is Russell Wilson, I would not be surprised.
That's the first thing I was thinking of when I saw this pick too. So I'm glad you did as well. I'm not saying he's definitely, I don't think he's definitely not as polished even as Russell Wilson was, and Wilson was considered a project. So I don't expect it to happen, But I would not be shocked if they give Milroe a shot at least by the end of the season, because they don't really have a long-term option right now.
Yeah. And even if it's, we saw enough in practice to feel okay, and maybe Sam Darnold doesn't get them to the playoffs, and they're like, you know what, we're going to give Milroe a year before we decide, or something along those lines. And maybe he never sees the field because Darnold balls out again. Well, it's all up in the air. Wait and see. But then the next quarterback taken, which was the talking, which I'm impressed. We made it 35 minutes. I'll even mention this when we're talking draft recap.
Yeah.
So Couch GMs don't just lead with the big stories. We like to talk about some other things too. Now we're going to talk about one Mr. Shedeur Sanders, falling to the 5th round, but in the third round,
Third round pick 30.
third round pick 30, Dylan Gabriel was drafted by the Browns. So the Browns drafted 2 quarterbacks. Very interesting situation. When it comes to the Browns, though, when you look at their quarterback room, they have Deshaun Watson, who tore his Achilles, so he's not really in the mix for 2025. Then you have Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, who they're not going to pick up his 5th-year option, and Shedeur Sanders. Who starts?
I think they should probably start with Kenny Pickett, at least in my mind. I think your first shot is take the younger guy who has some experience, see if he can really turn him into something, if not to keep long-term, to trade. Get something more out of him, because you just traded for him. You obviously brought him in hoping that he could be a guy. We've seen some of these guys at the end or onto their second contract at quarterback lately turn into someone that could be a competent quarterback. You're hoping to do that with Kenny Pickett. He gets the first shot. You drafted Gabriel in the 3rd round and you drafted Sanders in the 5th round because they're raw talent. They need time to sit behind. They brought in Joe Flacco to be the mentor at this point. I don't think there's any reason for you to start Flacco unless there's injury concerns, because you know what you have out of Flacco. He's a 40-something-year-old quarterback. You're not really a win now team, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And if you do end up being in that situation where you're making a playoff run and Flacco is your best option, maybe at that point you pivot later in the season. But I don't see a reason to start the season with Flacco, being that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, we are 2 years removed from Flacco winning comeback player of the year to lead the Browns on a playoff run, which is just wild to think about in general. But honestly, I look at Flacco almost like what was it, McCown for the Eagles a couple years ago, back in the COVID year, where they're like, hey, you're going to be our 3rd string quarterback, but because of the pandemic, you go live in Houston, right?
Yep.
And obviously they're not going to do that now because of the rules and stuff like that. But I could see Flacco not really taking any reps. He might even be, quote unquote, the number 2 quarterback. And then they let one of the rookies be the emergency quarterback on game day, but he doesn't need the reps. Like, he'll take a couple reps, but they'll let these guys. But I think the battle comes down to Shedeur and Gabriel for me. I think they're drafted close enough that, yeah, Gabriel might, quote unquote, get the start because he's a 3rd round pick. But Sanders in the 5th round is, an ultimate lottery ticket, because I think he was worth more than that. Some people didn't. He went where he went. That's what it is. But if you told me Shedeur ends up starting the season, would not be surprised. You told me Shedeur is, hanging on for dear life as QB3, would not be surprised. Same could be said with Dylan Gabriel. Same could be said with Kenny Pickett. My thing is do they risk cutting Gabriel or Shedeur at cutdown day, or is this another year in a row that the Browns go into the starting the season with 4 quarterbacks on the roster?
I think your best chance is they go into the year starting with 4 quarterbacks. And if they start with 3, as much as I said they should start the season with Pickett, I think your best chance of having somebody not on the roster is Pickett, because they would flip him to a team that needs a backup or needs a starter because of an injury and get some of that draft capital back.
I could see Flacco also being cut. Similar situation. Hey, Flacco, we're going to cut you. If another team calls, great. If not, we know you. We can start. You've done this before. You can come off the bench, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or like, they try to get around it, or so on and so on. But yeah, that is the Shedeur Sanders, and I'm very fascinated to see how that one plays out. And he has the number 3 highest rookie selling jersey so far, because that stat already came out on which rookies had the highest selling 3 days after the draft, and Shedeur is number 3 behind Travis Hunter and Cam Ward? No. Wasn't
Abdul
Cam.
Carter?
I don't think so. I have to go find the list.
Okay.
But doesn't matter. A couple other names I did want to mention quick, just some later round guys that I'm paying attention to. Jalen Royals with the Kansas City Chiefs. He had potential to go in the second round. He went in the fourth round. He's like he's a little bit more of a slot guy, who can do a little bit outside, but think, Randall Cobb, maybe a Juju Smith-Schuster might be a little bit better comp who they still have. But we still have uncertainty about Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy's had his thing. That is a name just to watch as you're doing your dynasty drafts, especially if you're doing them earlier rather than later. A name to take a flyer on potentially. Always want to give a shout out to Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech, one of my favorite players in the draft. Goes to the Washington Commanders, who, by the way, did announce a new stadium, and some of those renderings look beautiful. Now it's not going to be ready until 2030, but they're expected to get a Super Bowl. And
that's
for
surprising.
my wallet, I mean, DC is a big market, and it's going to be a dome. So
yeah,
and even when it's not a dome, I mean, the Giants got a Super Bowl when they built the new one, just because it was a new stadium, and they played that Super Bowl in the cold. At least this one will be inside. But please, for my wallet, you know what? Screw my wallet. Give me Green Bay playing a Super Bowl in Washington. I will spend by 2030, it'll be $9,000 for a nosebleed ticket, but I'm paying it to go. The Packers are in there.
At least you wouldn't have to pay for board at that point, and you could drive it.
You're right. Perfect. I like the way you think.
There you go.
And then I don't know how this is going to pan out in terms of, but the last name I want to mention, especially when we're thinking fantasy, he was a later round pick. I don't remember if it was round 5 or it was round 5, pick 149. The Dallas Cowboys selected Jaden Blue from the University of Texas. I think Jaden Blue is an underrated player. This is a very deep running back class, like we mentioned. The Cowboys have Javonte Williams as their running back right now. So Jaden Blue is a name I'm definitely going to be paying attention to. Might even take the flyer in Dynasty, might reach for him a little bit. But that is a name I wanted to mention.
Interesting to me too, because normally you'll look at it and be like, he was drafted later than like Cam Scatterbo, who went to the Giants in round 4. But fit means so much. And I do think I want to keep an eye on Scatterbo as well and see how the Giants running back depth charts plans out. But Blue has a better head up because of the fact that the Cowboys are desperate for a running back and they don't really have anyone else there right now.
Yeah. And I guess if we're talking running backs, Jordan James out of Oregon, we talked about him on our running back show. He goes in the 5th round of the 49ers. Remember, they still have CMC, but they did trade Jordan Mason to the Minnesota Vikings. And with that offense, it is always worth, keeping tabs on who's playing running back for them.
Exactly. And Bashal Tutin, who best name in the draft, he went to Jacksonville. So he's in a 3-headed running back room now too. So it's interesting. We're gonna have a lot of discussions about the running back position and fits, because I think there's a lot of guys who have the talent in this draft, but it's finding the guys who have the talent and the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And I know I've said this, one more guy, running back, round 6, just because I think it's funny. Ollie Gordon II at Oklahoma State was supposed to be a lot better, had a rough year this past year, falls to the 6th round. But for what it's worth, had 99 speed in college football and goes to the Miami Dolphins. So
Fitting.
But I think that is pretty much like all the names I want to talk about. Obviously, the draft is one of my favorite times of the year. I love seeing where these players go. Heck, we saw kickers go. The Ravens took a kicker for the first time in history. Punters go. Wide receivers go places. We had the Shedeur Sanders fall. Before we get out of here, any last comments on the NFL draft?
I think we weren't expecting a lot of movement in this draft, and there ended up being quite a few trades, but the big one at the top of the draft really setting the tone with the Jags surprising everyone to move up to get Travis Hunter was just, I think, the perfect thing to kick off the draft, especially with Cam Ward just being the lock number 1. The draft started at 2. And it was fun. just to see, even though it was considered a weaker draft class, to see a lot of good fits, and there's going to be some good players coming out of this draft. So even though it wasn't the most exciting, hyped draft, I think it was very entertaining.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought the no trades kind of, especially because there's only 3 in the first round, or I guess 4. I forget the Eagles and the Chiefs swap picks, but
Yeah.
4 trades in the first round kept it pretty straight to the board. A bunch of good players gone. Obviously, we call it a weak draft class, but as we know, some players are going to boom, some players are going to bust. We're going to have a 5th-round star that nobody saw coming. That's just life in the NFL. And honestly, it's always a great weekend. But George, this will wrap up our Friday Monday. Thanks for listening. Let us know in the comments who your draft crushes were, if your team got the guy you wanted. If you're a Steelers fan and mad you didn't take a quarterback, so you got Will Howard late on day 3, let us know. Follow us at the Couch GMs on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, all those good places. Man, we're getting closer to the regular season kicking off. I'm Cody Roadcap. That's George Kurt. We'll talk to you all on Thursday.